Welcome to Around the Empire, the show that takes you around the U.S. empire. I'm your host, Dan Wright.
I'm your co-host, Joanne Leo.
And on today's show, May 20th, 2017, we have Doug Henwood as our guest. Doug is an American journalist, economic analyst, who writes frequently about economic affairs. He publishes a newsletter, Left Business Observer. He also hosts the program Behind the News, a weekly radio show covering economics and politics. And today we're going to talk about his article at Left Business Observer titled The Post-Trump Era. Here is that interview. Okay, today we have an interview with journalist, economic analyst Doug Henwood. Doug, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Hi,
Good.
Doug. Thanks for doing the interview today. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, Doug, so one of the things we wanted to talk about with you today is a recent piece you did that I read on Left Business Observer News called The Post-Trump Era. And the idea behind it is, as I understand it, is you think there's a possibility Trump may not last his term. And if he does get impeached or removed from office or resigns or whatever, for whatever reason, you seem to be worried that Vice President Pence is actually going to be a much worse option for people on the left who are worried about Trump. Is that a fair read of it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I after the fact, I thought I should have called the piece "Impeach Trump? God no!" exclamation point. And I think it's much better for people on our side of the political spectrum if we have this damaged, discredited character running the show or pretending to run the show, rather than Pence, who is an experienced legislator and executive. This guy spent 12 years in Congress. He spent 4 years as governor of Indiana. He knows a lot of people in Congress. He knows how the place works. And, there's certainly divisions in the Republican Party that he would also have to finesse. He himself came out of the Tea Party branch. He's an extremely conservative character. But a combination, I think, of his greater executive skills, basis and experience, and any sense of relief that might result on getting rid of Trump, I think those two things could make it very easy for him to pass pretty much the entire right-wing agenda. He's a very, very frightening character. He's extremely right-wing, balanced budget, security privatizer, social security privatizer, but also vicious on abortion, on gay rights, on freedom of speech, just a total horror for the far right wing of the Republican Party. And I can understand people would like to be rid of Trump. I know a lot of people find him very distressing and in the psychological sense. But I just think it'd be much worse to have Pence in charge. A combination of his presumably greater executive skills and the sense of relief that people would feel on seeing Trump gone could produce some very, very dangerous legislation.
Well, do you think there is any ideological difference? Because if you look at the primaries, there was this at least theory that, Trump actually is representing the new right, the alt-right, and that the mainstream Republicans, who are much more big business shills, don't actually like the anti-immigration agenda. They don't actually like, ethno-nationalism, which isn't necessarily good if you're into, global trade deals. Trump is so incompetent. He's not going to, Pence isn't going to pick up the baton for those. He's just going to do his Christian conservatism dance and tax cuts.
Well, the Christian conservatism is frightening. I mean, people rightly criticize Trump as a misogynist, which he is, certainly in a deeply personal sense. But the anti-abortion bill that Pence saw through in Indiana was the most extreme in the country. And, he is, I think, a classic patriarch in that deep Christian sense. So that part is frightening. Now, I will concede that Trump, by playing to that alt-right crowd, by having Bannon and Miller and people like that in the White House, does energize some of the worst forces in American society. And Pence might not have that effect. But Trump himself, I don't even know, does he have any politics? I mean, he's just, it wasn't all that long ago he's a Democrat and giving money to the Clinton Foundation. And I think he was registered as a Democrat. The guy has no principles. He's completely cynical and crazy and kind of stupid. But on the other hand, Trump Pence is a real ideologue and very committed to the full right-wing agenda. And although I certainly would like to see the alt-right crowd deflated by Trump's departure, the actual kinds of legislation that Pence might want to get passed would do a whole lot more damage to the country as a whole. That nationalist stuff is frightening. It's hideous. I mean, I don't think that free trade is the cure for all our ills by any means, but I don't know. I think capitalist internationalism is preferable to this reactionary nationalism that Trump represents.
Yeah, well, it seems like Trump's not going to get. I mean, this is kind of the part of your piece that I saw that I thought was interesting, and that why I'm actually with you on this. I think Pence is much more dangerous because he's going to get something done. It looks like, and this is the one. Now we're knee deep in this RussiaGate fake conspiracy theory I've been battling online. I don't know if you believe, or how much of it you believe, I guess.
Who knows what the Russians are up to? We don't really know.
Right.
The obsession that the Democrats have with Russia is just pathetic and sad. And that Time magazine cover this week with the
St. Basil's Cathedral,
White House morphing into it's just the liberal intelligentsia and journalists and the Democratic Party have largely lost their mind.
They have lost their minds. They definitely have.
But I think it's covering up the fact that they don't really have any kind of effective political response to Trump. So this is carrying forward the strategy that Hillary Clinton used with such great success, right? By trying to treat Trump as somehow different from all other Republicans, and somehow like that gives normal Republicans, whoever they are, a pass. Here we're doing the same thing again. It's all Trump, 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 Russia, Russia, Russia. But what about the politics of it? And there was an extraordinary piece in Politico the other day, which I believe I quoted in my blog post, that was critical of Sanders, quoted a whole bunch of establishment Democrats critical of Bernie Sanders for not really behaving very well. And they're annoyed that the guy took this week to introduce a single payer bill. So here we have Republicans trying to take away health care from 20 or 25 million people. Just a massively unpopular thing. There's this woman in Tennessee who tried to run her congressman off the road the other week because of his vote for this thing. It's just immense popular dissatisfaction with this. There's certainly been critical of Obamacare myself. There are many shortcomings in the thing, but what the Republicans want to do is far, far worse. And here's Bernie Sanders coming in, introducing a bill that would expand health care. For maybe 20 million people. The Obamacare brought the uninsurance rate down from 16% to about 10%. Okay, about 6 percentage points is good, but we still have 10 percentage points to go. There are many flaws in the thing, all the co-payments, the cost shifting that people are experiencing, the tighter networks. So Sanders comes in with this single payer bill, and he's criticized by Democrats. One of them actually said, by putting all the attention on himself. No, he's trying to bring healthcare to scores of millions of people. And this is somehow perceived as Sanders' ego run amok. So, the Democrats have no politics at all, no political response to Trump. So, to the Republicans in general. So it's all Trump, Trump, Trump. And if this Trump thing were removed, if this Trump growth on our body politic were removed, they would still have no response to the broader Republican agenda. This is the same problem that the Hillary campaign had. There was virtually no political content to her campaign. They've seen analyses of her ads, and it was the most content-free campaign since the records began, I believe, in around 1980. It was all Trump, Russia, bad guy, nasty man. Okay, he is. He's horrible. But there also is a politics behind it, and the Republicans now control, all the branches of the federal government, and something like 2/3 or 3/4 of the states, and they are absolutely paralyzed in coming up with any kind of political response to this. And getting rid of Trump would just really leave them reeling. I don't know what they'd do.
Is it incompetence, or is it? Here's my read on it from seeing it morphed: is that they don't actually want to embrace a socially democratic agenda. That's bad for the people that run the Democratic Party, which is essentially
I completely agree with that.
So Russia and this other stuff they think it comes in waves. They think there's going to be an anti-Republican wave, but they don't want to change because that'll alienate their donor class, right? So it's my read on it is, let's talk about this personality is we embrace policies that our donors are going to hate, even though they're popular with their actual constituents. Is that kind of your read, that they don't want to actually change?
I think that's actually true. And one of the things that was so interesting about the Sanders campaign is that it smoked out a bunch of Democrats and made them come out explicitly against the social democratic agenda.
Yeah.
You saw Democrats actually, there was a time in the Democratic Party when the New Deal was a sacred moment, and FDR, a revered figure, rightly so. There are many, you could criticize things about the New Deal, but it was certainly one of the better moments in American political history. And you had people like John Lewis and pundits like Jamel Bowie, denouncing any notion of free tuition, universal health care, things that should be no-brainers for a left of center party. And yet they were forced actually to run against it because Sanders brought out all these contradictions and made them very visible and showed the party as the dupe of business that it is. The problem with the Democratic Party is it has to be two things. It is fundamentally a business party that has to pretend otherwise for electoral reasons. It has to pretend that it's a popular party. It has to appeal in some way to its base. And all these things that people complain about the party, that it's confused or weak or whatever, or why don't the Democrats have a backbone? It's because they're trying to do these two things at once and it's impossible to reconcile. And so they prefer to try to finesse that and not really run much on issues. And certainly not provide anything like an appealing alternative to the Republican agenda, because it would mean going too much in a Sanders-like direction. And it's clear that the leadership of the party just doesn't want to do that. And Hillary was a terrible candidate. She's a terrible politician. And she wasn't able to talk her way out of this contradiction the way her husband was able to do. But who else do they have now? They have nobody. No other successors. The party's talent bench is rather thin. No, it's a sad and pathetic thing to watch.
Well, they do have some successors, but they're afraid of them. People like Bernie, like Tulsi Gabbard, even Elizabeth Warren, I would say. Although she might be able to thread that needle. I'm not sure.
They have Warren. They do have. I have problems with Tulsi Gabbard, but they have Warren. They have Sanders. They're both pretty old. And at the same time, we've seen this explosion of interest in leftist social democratic politics from people particularly under 35 or 40. And from what I hear, I haven't really seen any further empirical confirmation of this, but from what I hear, there are a whole lot of young people like entering politics at the local level, inspired by the Sanders campaign. So that's promising for the future. But just in conventional terms, the Democrats have lost so many governorships, they've lost so many seats in Congress that they don't have the kinds of people who would be national figures or in the pipeline to be national figures that they could have otherwise. So yeah, these young people are very inspiring and great news for the future, but it's going to take time for that to work through. And right now, they're really just out of people and out of ideas. And the idea that we're thinking about, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton, even, the same cast of characters. 4 years, 4 years from now, it makes me want to just enter
It's pretty clear. Biden thinks he's the savior. He thinks he's going to step up and do a do-over, sort of, do
was that emblematic? Doug, did you see this? And Joanne saw this too, where it was a town hall with Nancy Pelosi, who for some reason is still the House Minority Leader, despite losing every election. And a young guy, probably millennial, probably in his early 20s, asked, hey, what do you think about some of these Bernie Sanders ideas about reforming the economy? This is the CNN town hall. And Nancy Pelosi jumped up and said, sorry, we're capitalists, and shut him down. And I said, there is the symbol of the Sanders wing, who, by the way, Sanders won all voters of all backgrounds, ethnicities, genders, under 30, I think under 42 on some calculations. And here's a younger person asking this establishment hack who just won't leave and won't win either, so can't succeed and won't leave, about some new economic ideas. And her response, live event, is to just stand up and get right in his face and say, we're capitalists.
You'd almost think they have a death wish, But on the other hand, their paymasters will let them talk otherwise, and they're not clever enough to pretend otherwise. And like I said earlier, Bill Clinton had the political skills and the personal charm to pull off that con game, but he was, the most talented politician of our time, and that nobody else can do it the way he can. So they're really, revealed with their pants down in a most unattractive way.
And the cons run out. I mean, he, thanks to his, City Group Protection Act, or Graham Leach, whatever it was called, he helped destroy what was left of the New Deal regulations, and we left a crisis. And I wonder if you are in the white working class and you see Donald Trump or even the alt-right coming at you, and then on the other side, you see these neoliberals who are talking about free market solutions. I can't begrudge them so much to being open to the far right. I mean, I think it's going to end in tears for them, even them. I mean, I just like if the appeal is neoliberalism, which is killing them, literally. Life expectancy is going down. It's been a disaster. The manufacturing base has been destroyed, at least in their communities. I think social democracy is actually the solution for them, but I can't begrudge them to look at these far right guys. Can you?
No, I can understand why they'll do it. And, I think some people are driven by the hatred, and some people just overlook it and think, maybe we can get something out of it. For me, but obviously now that Trump is in office, they're not going to get much out of him. So they're hoping in this disruptive figure is going to be deeply disappointed. But yeah, you can't fight that kind of, the passion behind the alt-right politics, but then you also can't appeal to the suffering of these folks have been, maybe the bottom 40% of the population of all colors who've just been, taking the short end of it for decades now. And all they get is the same old nonsense coming out of the Democratic Party. So you get these, lunatic right-wing nationalists, and then you have like the Wall Street wing of the Democratic Party. That seems to be the acceptable spectrum in the U.S. politics now, and it just has nothing to offer anyone. It's just snake oil. I can understand if you're a hedge fund guy, you'd like this arrangement, but if you're not a hedge fund guy, it's really got nothing to offer you.
The things that the Republicans can do under Pence, they're terrifying. I mean, some people say they could even get a constitutional amendment, but there's actually something that scares me even more than that, because legislative things could be undone. I mean, the damage done to the people in particular time can't be undone, but technically the legislative damage could be undone. But there's pretty much only one silver lining to Trump in my view, and that has to do, well, maybe you could say two. One is he just destroyed two political dynasties. He bucks the system, let's put it that way. And the other is he has a couple good foreign policy aspects to him. But if he's impeached and just, wiped from history like people would like to do, then my fear is that the next person who would be inclined or would have the ability to buck the system and to push back against the deep state or whoever it is that's leading this charge against him, I think they would be terrified. I think all motivation to ever try again to really change this system, people would be too afraid to do it because they would realize what kind of thing would rise up against them and eviscerate them, even without any real evidence. I mean, the way this is being done, there's really no hard evidence yet. That, I think, is terrifying and much more permanent damage.
I agree with that. I think that it's really stunning to see a lot of liberals and mainstream Democrats cheering on the CIA with such enthusiasm as they leak to the New York Times and Washington Post. It's almost become a regular daily occurrence now. Sometime between 3 and 5 p.m., I get a bulletin of some new shocker on my phone, and the source is, who knows? But, who knows what's going on in these Oval Office conversations? Who told the papers that, for example, that Trump said that preposterous thing to the Russian foreign minister about firing the nut job?
Who leaked an intercepted phone call? Who could even leak an intercepted phone call besides someone in the intelligence? Yeah,
it makes you wonder if they've got the Oval Office bug.
There were only 6 people in the room, right?
Right. So this whole process is basically a kind of coup going on before our eyes. And I want to make clear, I hate Trump. He's just a vile figure in every respect, personal and political. Hideous, horrible character. But on the other hand, he is the legally elected president of the United States under our crazy electoral college system. It's crazy, but he is a legally elected president. And to have what looks like a coup led by the intelligence agencies against this guy makes you wonder that, say, Sanders had won by some fluke, what would they be doing with him?
Yeah, same thing.
And it's just a really, really bad precedent to turn over the judgment of whether a person is an acceptable president or not to intelligence agencies that have like a 7-decade history of lying, assassination, coups, secret wars. These people are professional liars, and here they are, just like leaking all this stuff about Trump, who is horrible, but he is the elected president. So we're going to cheer on some kind of coup in the installation of maybe. I don't think that we're going to end it. Impeachment seems pretty unlikely at this point. But what I think they'd like to do is drive the guy crazy and force him to resign or make him resign because his psychological makeup is perhaps not the strongest and healthiest. But this displacing the legally elected president like this is just a very, 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 very bad precedent. And the cheering of this by, I think, people who should know better is really depressing.
Well, it's partisan in one case. These are the same people who were calling for Comey to be fired for a lack of professionalism or a lack of, which, by the way, I think it's fair. Investigators usually don't hold a press conference. But now suddenly Comey's a hero again.
Yeah, I know. It's really hard to keep up,
Really.
So I wonder, that takes two to tango. That's what worries me. It's not that the intelligence agencies are playing games. They've been playing games since 1945. I mean, which is not a happy thing. But it's that there's so many willing participants who, at one point, it reminds me kind of when Obama came in after Bush and started doing some of the same things Bush did, these drone strikes, these kind of illegal warfare. He kept using the AUMF, the Authorization for Use of Military Force from 2001. That was a justification for these interventions. And you got to say, man, where were what happened to all the anti-war activists? Where did they go?
They only dislike Republican wars.
Yes, that's so true.
Mark Landler, a New York Times reporter, in his book on the Obama-Hillary relationship, said that Obama came into office wanting to do a fundamental change in the U.S.-Israel relationship. And he was blocked at every turn by the security establishment, which included Hillary at that point. And Obama, certainly no radical, very much a man of the establishment, but he wanted to maybe readjust the U.S. Policy towards Israel, and he was unable to do it because of all these existing forces that made it impossible. And late in his tenure, he did give some interviews where he complained about the security establishment. He resisted them in Syria. They would have wanted to be much more aggressive about regime change in Syria, and he wouldn't do it.
Iran deal.
The Iran deal. Also something that, Hillary and people like that were not very fond of. So, even if this establishment figure found it difficult to make fairly modest changes in American foreign policy, makes you wonder about how anything more fundamental can be redone, given the power of this Wayne Barrett and people at the Village Voice used to call the permanent government. They're ones who stay in power while elected officials come and go.
Yeah, it's almost like there's too many forces. Actually, that story you just told reminded me of the Ron Suskind story in Confidence Men, where Obama straight up ordered Tim Geithner to give him a plan to break up Citigroup. And Tim Geithner kind of, yes, sir, and then didn't do anything. He was, quote, slow walked him.
Yes.
Quote unquote. So, kind of makes you wonder if there is this permanent establishment in Washington and maybe nobody can overcome them. I've just never seen this naked use of power of people in positions of, that irritated a lot of people at Shadowproof and elsewhere was this war on whistleblowers, right? And he couldn't stop prosecuting people. And the security establishment, the Washington Post cheered him on. In fact, they vilified their own source with Edward Snowden. They ran an editorial against Edward Snowden, who was a story they broke. Now you've got people in the security establishment leaking nonstop, and suddenly democracy dies in the darkness. So I guess it's all partisan. Maybe that's the...
Yeah, well, that Washington Post slogan, which is pretty funny, democracy dies in darkness. But now it looks to be dying in open light.
Yeah, and broad daylight.
Yeah.
They must feel pretty confident because I've never seen such a, as Dan said, a naked power grab, and they don't even seem to care whether the country sees this going on. Either that, or maybe they're delusional and think that we're so stupid we can't at all figure out who's pulling the strings here. But maybe that's the one good thing that could come out of it, is that people have a better, I don't know how to put it without starting to sound all conspiratorial, but they'll start to see that permanent government.
I'd say I'd say this. I could say maybe in conclusion that politics, U.S. politics over the last year or so has been just so very clarifying. We got to see what the Democratic Party is all about when they faced the Sanders challenge. They drew the line at anything like social democracy. You needed skin in the game, as Hillary said, or nobody gets anything for free, as John Lewis said, because of Sanders' rather modest social democratic agenda. And now that Trump is in power, mostly horrifying, but one of the less bad things about him is that he doesn't want to go to war with Russia the way Hillary and John McCain seem to want to. And that's being frustrated at every turn. And so we're really seeing made very explicit, who the exercise of power. That the president is really not the most powerful person in the world. There are very substantial constraints on what a president can do. I don't want Trump to get his agenda accomplished by any means, but the way this permanent government is exercising its discipline over him is very clarifying. It really lets us know, who runs the show in this country, and what forces do, and what limits there are on what a president can do. And it's not a pretty picture in either case, the Democratic Party or this permanent government acting openly. But at least we're better informed for it. And
what role the mainstream media plays in being their apparatchik.
Foot soldiers.
Foot soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what's called reporting is just taking dictation from CIA sources.
And then slapping a either former or current administration official anonymous tag to
anonymous sources. Okay, well, Doug, thank you so much. Where can people find your work?
Thanks for having me. I do the blog, lbo-news.com, and it has some of my writing, but also links to my radio show if people want to listen to that.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Great to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Peace. And that's our show. I want to thank you for listening, and a special thank you to Doug Henwood for being our guest. Find him on Twitter at Doug Henwood. Check out his website, lbo-news.com. That's Left Business Observer. If you'd like to support the show, we'd appreciate it. Patreon.com/Around the Empire for as little as $5 a month. Help us put on the show. Questions, comments, want to yell at me? Dan at shatterproof.com. Thanks. See you next time.
See ya.